This is Joe Lindsley talking to you from Lviv, Ukraine. I'm an American.
Yeah, and it was Zakhar Pikh, as usual, your favorite Zakhar Pikh. And our amazing friend from Australia, Drew Pavlou.
My name's Drew Pavlou. I'm an Australian.
Доброго вечора, ми з України.
This is Joe Lindsley in Lviv, Ukraine. Speak Freely podcast, part of the Ukrainian Freedom News. Here with my co-host and colleague, Zakhar Pikh, and also with our special guest from Australia. Good evening to you, Drew Pavlou, and you're speaking to us, I think, from Brisbane.
Yes, Brisbane, Australia, and thanks so much for having me on. I was in Lviv like 4 or 5 weeks ago. My biggest regret is that I just wasn't able to stay longer. It was such a spur of the moment thing because I've been basically campaigning for election in Australia for like 11, 12 months now. I've been basically campaigning against the Chinese Communist Party for about 3 years now. And I obviously like really support the Ukrainian cause. I mean, you look at Putin, you look at Xi, they've got this fascist pact of steel together. And so you have to oppose both at the same time. I mean, you can't oppose one without the other.
I'm so sorry. We'll continue. I like details. I watched a video where you have been arrested. It was in Australia, right?
Yeah, and I've been trying to demonstrate how we've been losing our free speech, our ability to criticize China. So, you know, when I got hit at the university didn't take my side. They actually spent like $500,000 trying to expel me because they had a $200 million a year relationship with China. And so that's what started my whole political career, almost by accident, because I was only 20 years old. I'm still only 22. And I've been campaigning for 3 years now. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Sydney, Australia, campaigning alongside one of our candidates for the election, Kim Dongdu. She's a Tibetan Australian.
I'm sorry, Drew.
Sorry.
I want to make it clear. Like, you in Australia, you made a protest and said shit about Chinese presidents, right?
Yeah. Just said fuck Xi Jinping.
And after that, Asian police guy arrested you.
No, so this was the first week. The first week I got punched and like we got like assaulted basically by like Chinese government supporters. And then the following week, the police were threatening to charge me for the sign that had offensive language. I reported, but I was like, hang on, I was the one who got assaulted. So I reported it, the people who assaulted us, the police and stuff like that. Keep in mind, they never really got arrested. They ended up getting charged, but never arrested. I was like, okay.
Because I watched that video and the guy who like touched you, he was Asian, like look like Chinese. So.
Yeah. So I think he was like a Chinese Australian. I don't necessarily know whether he was like a citizen or not. It's pretty terrible that he would be thinking he'd be willing to attack and violently assault a fellow Australian just because that Australian criticized a dictator who's supporting massive war crimes in Ukraine right now, a dictator who has 1 million Muslims in concentration camps, one of the most brutal dictators in the world right now. You know, if you have a protest in the street, you'll always see signs that say like fuck the Prime Minister, fuck Scott Morrison, etc. None of these people are ever threatened with arrest. None of these people are ever bashed. It's just a normal occurrence. But because I just said fuck Xi Jinping, these people were trying to attack me. I went back. I was like, if they're going to threaten me, I'm going to go back as a way to I am a very big supporter in free speech. And, you know, what is free speech unless we're trying to, you know, push the boundaries of free speech? To me, there were Chinese government supporters who were attacking people. They didn't arrest them. They arrested me. And my sign that week didn't even have a profanity on it. It just had, you know, free Hong Kong, free Tibet, free the Uyghurs, down with the CCP. And they actually arrested me. And I was in in a steel cage for like 5 hours until they bailed me after midnight. Like, so I've got 2 police charges now. The offensive language one and failure to follow a police direction.
From afar, like during the pandemic, and I think during the pandemic, I got stuck here when the pandemic started, and I was happy to be stuck here because I think it was one of the freest countries in the world during the time because of the 2014 revolution. The Ukrainian government knew that they could not lock people in their houses like they did in France or the UK or Israel. They would have had the revolution. But I didn't follow it too closely, but what I heard coming from Australia, it seemed rather draconian.
Oh yeah, it was pretty.
Yeah, I have same question, but I'm sorry, Joe. I want to rephrase that because maybe it's a coincidence, maybe not, I don't know, but
Yeah,
I remember that during the fucking COVID, you had very strict laws about that, and very long, like after the world like came back to the simple life, but in Australia you still sit at home. So now I can see some similarity between Australian governments and Chinese.
Yeah. Well, look,
and
at the moment,
I think it's look like because Australia is very liberality country, right?
Oh, you mean
a
like
lot of fucking liberals.
Oh yeah, you mean
in China? In China, we have a lot of dictators. Fucking Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
So I think that's two ways. That's two ways. It's one shit. And they're making the same shit. The citizens have to sit at home and they have to be afraid. And it doesn't matter about what. They have to be afraid. And when they are afraid, they don't ask questions.
Yeah. So, you mean like liberal in the American political context, like liberal to conservative, like that political?
I'm talking also about your Eurovision singer, for example, yesterday. A lot of that the different shit in the world, what is going on now. All that fucking organizations.
Who was the Australian Eurovision singer? I didn't actually see that.
I will share a link in the chat.
I didn't see it. I did see Ukraine win, which was awesome. Like, when the pandemic started, I was initially in favor of, the health restrictions and stuff like that, because I was very worried at first. I mean, I still believe it was a lab leak. I still think like most of the evidence points towards that being a lab leak from the Wuhan biosecurity lab or whatever, because just the Chinese government's behavior in the initial months of the pandemic was just so suspicious. The way that they were trying to destroy all evidence, the way they were trying to like lock up all journalists and doctors who would criticize the government's whatever the government was saying about COVID, and they were trying to say stuff like there's no human-to-human transmission, stuff like that. Still, people even now, like on Twitter and stuff like that, especially like Australian, like it's sort of like establishment left types and stuff like that, who are going like, well, like why did we open up? We should go back to shut down and stuff like that. And like even with Omicron, they wanted to keep it shut down indefinitely. And it's like the people who were calling for that, man, they were always the same types of people who like they were like media personalities who would live in mansions on Sydney Harbour and stuff like that, like really well-off elite people. But like people in West Sydney, man, there were mums in like single bedroom apartments with like 4 or 5 kids. There were people in housing commissions. They were locked down and they had the army in the streets trying to enforce it. And like, and people couldn't go, like if they couldn't work from home, like what could people do? Like they were given such a bad choice. Like it was just brutal.
Do you think, because when you said our impression of Australia, and I always imagined this kind of wild, free-spirited, kind of like Western, like Texas type of country. And here in Ukraine has had one of the lowest vaccination rates in the world, and by all good evidence,
and we're still alive.
So
without that shit.
And furthermore, it's like out of the 30% or 28% that were vaccinated, at least half of those are probably fake. Even like the most innocent school teachers I know got fake documents, because Ukrainians just very kind of quietly like their freedom and they want to be left alone. And this has been their history for 1,000 years, really. As I've learned a lot during this war, like Russia has tried to control, and other empires have tried to control these people for a long time, and they really like to be free without making a big noise about it. And that's how that's what I saw in the pandemic. And I wonder, like when I hear of yours, how you're opening Australians' eyes and the world's eyes to Chinese control of your country, but it already sounds like some of your population is well prepared to be governed in a Chinese way. I mean, is there some
separate?
Yeah.
The thing is, it's not even. I wouldn't say it's the Chinese way. I mean, because you have dictatorship in Russia, you have dictatorship all across the world. I mean, I think it's just broader the struggle between like autocracy, authoritarianism, freedom, and it's hard, man. It's very interesting in Australia because it's like on one hand we're like the nation of like free spirits. Like I don't know if you guys have ever heard the story of Ned Kelly, the outlaw bushranger. Like some of the biggest icons in Australian history are like these free-spirited rebels. But at the same time, and I think sometimes Australians can be very, very like, freedom-loving. I mean, look, like over the past 2-3 years, as China has tried to like use its economic coercion against Australia, like for example, even last year, they issued a list of 14 demands to Australia where they were like, unless you give in to these 14 demands, we're going to basically cut off like almost all your exports apart from coal and iron ore. And basically the 14 demands were shit like, they were saying like close down all your journal, like they were like close down the free press when they criticized China, shut down university institutes that criticized China, like just insane stuff that Australia could never accept without becoming a vassal state. And it basically hit billions and billions of dollars of Australian resources. But honestly, even the amazing, inspiring thing though was Australians like the vast majority stood together there and they like refused to bow down to like the Chinese government's bullying.
I have a question. You're young politic, yeah. I think you're already politic guy, and from other part of this amazing planet. And what is your view on that? That, for example, let's imagine like what will going on in the world at all, like in Australia, US, Europe, China, and other countries, if Ukraine defeat in this war, like tomorrow, for example, it become a big Russian empire, and what will go in next?
If
on your mind,
if Ukraine falls, the 21st century will be won by the dictators. It's as simple as that. This is the line in the sand, bro. This is where the history of the 21st century is being written. If there is no circumstance under which we can ever allow Ukraine to fall to Putin, because if this is allowed to occur, it will embolden China to invade Taiwan. Like all of Europe will be cowed into submission. I mean, look at Germany, look at the Central European powers, even look at France under Macron. I mean, I initially was thinking we need Macron to beat Le Pen because Le Pen has been so bad on defending Putin. But man, look at how Macron has acted after he's been elected. We were all deceived because we were being told Macron has to win because otherwise this pro-Putin Le Pen is going to be put in. But then Macron is elected and then he goes straight back to, I'm calling Putin and, Ukraine has to make concessions. You can't humiliate Putin. I mean, man, look at how...
He's just a doll in the chair.
Yeah,
in the center of Europe. And he cannot decide like nothing.
Yeah, and this is my point.
I'm talking about like big empires in the world, like China, Russia, United States, and like what will happen? Like China will take that part of world. US will sit with their BLM and LGBT guys and say, oh no, we have to sit and wait. What will be? And in Russia. Yeah, it will be the big Russian empire, like fucking Soviet European Union.
Yeah. Look, like what I was saying is like Macron, Scholz, Germany, France, they're already so weak on Ukraine. Like they've been forced kicking and screaming to do anything. Like they can't even stop gas. They can't even cut off the gas exports. They're still paying billions of dollars to Russia every single day. They've been so slow sending arms to defend Ukraine. And so my point is, brother, imagine if Ukraine were allowed to fall and Germany and France are already so weak, they already bow before Putin. Imagine what would happen if Putin actually wins in Ukraine. Oh my God, he'll have all of Europe, man, because Macron and Scholz, it looks like they're already trying to kowtow to him. So, man, if Ukraine falls, I feel like all of Europe, I'm not saying that there would be Russian tanks in Berlin and Paris. That's not what I'm saying, but
he just will buy them.
They would, they'd just be completely bought. Like they're already so slow. They're already so weak in the face of Putin. Imagine if Putin actually, takes Ukraine by force, then the Baltics will fall, probably Finland will fall. He'll resurrect basically the Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, who's to say they wouldn't fall? And Germany and France, they would just basically...
Italy, Germany, France, they will be happy that, we are friends with the Russians.
But they will just become, they will just be Russia's bitch. And if that is allowed to occur, imagine like Xi Jinping will then invade Taiwan because he will see that no one will be able to stop invaders. He will see that no one can stop dictators. He'll invade Taiwan. If Ukraine falls, he will invade Taiwan, and he won't stop at Taiwan. He's already making aggressive plays all across the region. And man, that's why I say some people, man, you know what I hate? The other thing I hate as well, like, so some of the people in America that are very weak on Putin, you know, are the progressives. But what about as well, like people like, I don't know if you've seen Joe, but like, for example, like that Masters guy who's running for the Senate in Arizona, who's going, how dare America arm Ukraine? This is not a fight for Americans. We don't defend our own border, but we're defending Ukraine's border. What short-sightedness, man, because does he not realize if Ukraine falls, all of Europe will be under Putin's thumb, and China will dominate Asia. China will make Australia and New Zealand vassal states. And what will be left of America under that scenario? What will be left under that scenario?
Okay.
So all these people, I don't understand that. If they don't, this is why it is the fundamental fight of our time. This is where the 21st century's history will be written. Because if Ukraine falls, the dictators, the appeasers, they will win. They will take power.
Drew, when you mentioned the American, the American politics is, it's madness for me. That's part of the reason why I stayed here in Ukraine, even in the war.
Insane, yeah.
And you can only think in the left box or the right box. A lot of people have been trying to break out of this, but at the high level, and so we have people that support Ukraine. But I think without really appreciating, like, I think if a lot of these people who support Ukraine knew what Ukraine was like during the pandemic, they would have some problem. But thankfully,
yeah, I remember a tweet. Where someone was like, "Oh, why are we defending Ukraine when they've got such a low vaccination rate?" It's like, are you guys fucking kidding? Like,
yeah, and I think that's going to come down the road more. But then we have on the American right, so-called, I hate these terms, but the people criticizing. Now, on one hand,
like JD Vance and Masters.
Yeah, and Rand Paul, and like after the 20-year disaster in Afghanistan, I understand the reflex to say, hey, hold up, let's think about it. But this is completely different from Afghanistan. This is a country where everyone is united in wanting to be free and independent. It's also a country that has, as you pointed out very eloquently, stands at the gates of Europe.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. You're talking about the past, about the history. It doesn't matter right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Straight questions, and please, very straight answers about the steps for the world, how to win with the evil. Like what the world have to do to help us to win exactly right now. Like in this
I agree.
Fucking moment. What do you think?
Well, the only reason
who and what they have to do.
See, I only brought that history because I think part of it is we've got to fight back against people in the West who want to appease, people who want us to basically allow Ukraine to fall. Like, and it's not just left and it's not just right. There are people on both sides in Western politics. It's the same in France, it's the same in Germany, it's the same in America, even in Australia, man. Like, this is the darkest thing, right? Like, so we were just talking about the whole COVID situation in Australia. And how it was like really, really like authoritarian. So there was this whole freedom movement.
They cannot understand that they will not have a peace in their countries if they will be just the hostages.
Yeah. I was just gonna say though, like, so this whole freedom movement that built up in Australia to fight back against the COVID restrictions and whatnot. These same people who were claiming to, who were saying that they were supporting freedom, they've actually mostly now sided with Russia.
And the same Americans who supported most vehemently the Ottawa protesters were not in favor of Ukraine. And here's the disconnect. But I think if we look at, like, when I look at the people of Hong Kong who, when they still were allowed to protest up until June 2020, they were waving American flags, British flags, and Ukrainian flags. They were so inspired by the revolution here. And with your experience with, working with the Uyghur people, the Muslim Uyghur people, of oppressed people of China, and the Hong Kongers, when you hear this type of rhetoric, about Ukraine, is it this the same pattern you see with Beijing trying to attack you and trying to attack the free people who want to be free in China and Hong Kong?
Yeah, you're so right, man. So like, I remember in the Hong Kong movement, there were so many times, even in Brisbane, Australia, where like my home city, the Hong Kongers would hold screenings of Winter on Fire as inspiration, and
Which
they
is
were
the movie,
so
the Netflix documentary about Ukraine. The
yeah,
2014
exactly.
revolution. Yeah.
And they were so inspired by the revolution in Ukraine, and so like I'm pretty sure like they adopted some of the slogans like the equivalent of like "Glory to Hong Kong" was sort of inspired by "Glory to Ukraine," and so yeah, the Hong Kongers have been so inspired by it. Same with the Uyghurs and the Tibetans, and it is this weird thing, right? Like where these people who've been like the Uyghurs, the Hong Kongers, the Tibetans, they've really been on the front line fighting against like the dictatorship, and they understand instinctively what the Ukrainians are going through.
What the simple Australian citizens, what they think about that? Australia giving a lot of equipment, a lot of money.
Oh, the vast majority
Australians money they are giving to Ukraine to support us.
Yeah.
Like, thank you so much for that, of course. But like in America, a lot of Americans say like, hey, we have the prices going higher and everything is getting worse only because we're supporting Ukraine, maybe. So Australians, but
yeah, I know that's what people say.
The people on their kitchens and talking with themselves, they're thinking.
I get what you mean.
What do Australians think about it?
I get what you mean. Well, look, I would say the cause of this economic chaos is Putin's disastrous, vicious invasion. And so if we want to put an end to the economic chaos, put an end to Putin's regime, put a final stop on his invasion of Ukraine, end the war with a Ukrainian victory, that will stop the economic chaos. That will stop the, surging fuel prices. But what good is, higher GDP growth if you're a slave? What good is it if there's higher GDP growth, but you're a slave, you don't have an independent country, you have no freedom, you can't live, you can't even live. I mean,
unfortunately, we can see we can see that in America, in Europe, maybe in Canada and other big progressive rich countries, we can see exactly that people are slaves. They can sit at home because of COVID, but they're happy because they have like enough money to take another credit to buy a new car, and that's more than it's more than enough for them.
See, for me personally, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees, and I think that's something that I think people all across the West need to reflect on, that very important motto. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. You can't just expect to be free while you can't expect to be free without fighting for your freedoms. And so there's some things that are much more important.
They're living in the bubble, and it's okay for them. And please, the last question I think for today. How do you think, or what is waiting for Russia after all this shit? What is waiting for Russia?
I hope
for the biggest country in the world.
Yeah, look, I hope all the butchers of Bucha, I hope all the war criminals are tried and convicted. They are convicted for their war crimes. I hope Putin ends his life in a cell. Or better yet, what did they do after the Nuremberg trials to the Nazi leaders? Sometimes war criminals and tyrants. What's that famous saying? Sic semper tyrannis, thus always the tyrants. I mean, the only good tyrant, unfortunately, is a dead tyrant. And so, I hope the dictators fall. I hope their lives end. I hope Putin's miserable life ends very quickly. I hope justice is done. It's a very tough thing because like we overthrow Putin, but what if the alternative is just as bad? We don't know. So it's a very hard thing, man. I think though I think the future of Russia will be decided in this war in Ukraine. Whether if Russia is defeated, then there is a chance that maybe Russia may be transformed into a democratic country that doesn't try and enslave its neighbors. If Russia can transform into a democratic country that no longer tries to enslave its neighbors, it just works on lifting its own people out of the crushing dirt poverty that a lot of them live in, then that would be a great thing for the world. But unfortunately, we've seen for a century plus, the power of Russian nationalism is very, very strong. Millions and millions and millions of Russian civilians, this is probably the scariest thing, probably the darkest thing. You know, tens of millions of Russians probably, like, it seems that tens of millions of Russians support the war.
Do you think it's possible that after Putin, it can come more crazy guy, and maybe he will make like even more shit than made a Putin already?
I don't know, man. I mean, what do you think as a Ukrainian? I'm interested in what you think.
No, we don't think about that. We just hope that they will disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Like,
but I've heard. I was talking with a Ukrainian philosopher, and several who said the same idea that Russia needs this kind of deep moral reckoning, similar to what Germany needed after World War II, because they voted for the Nazis, you know, and so it took a long time, and we still see some elements of German society still reckoning with that, and it's a scary thing to think about. But on the positive side, I'll say, you know, so many Ukrainian, and I, as an American in Ukraine, I feel that Ukraine, even in the war, is maybe the freest country in the world right now. And maybe this could be an awakening even for Americans and Canadians and Australians, and with people like you in Australia saying, hey, Ukrainians are willing to die for their freedom. What are you willing to do? You don't have to die for it in Australia now. You can just take small steps.
This is what people need to think about. If Ukrainians are willing to die for their freedom, to keep the whole world free, because if Ukraine falls, it will change the course of history. If Ukrainians are willing to die to defend the whole world from dictatorship and Nazism and fascism, then, you know, how can people be too lazy to, you know, get up off their asses and vote, protest, etc.? I mean, people need to start taking their own freedoms seriously. They need to start taking the fight for their own freedom seriously.
Thank you, Drew. It was very nice words. Thank you for that and for your position. I hope you will be elected, because I know that in the whole world, the young smart people have to go to government and change the old motherfuckers and do exactly the right things. So good luck, and let's hope that the true will win in this big war.
I will hopefully go back to Ukraine as soon as I can. And man, this is where the history of the 21st century is being written. Ukraine must win. There's no other option. There's no other alternative to a full Ukrainian victory.
So that's fantastic. I hope our next conversation will be in Lviv or in Sydney when you call us there.
Yes.
We'll have a little party there, and we'll talk what we have to do next. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my brothers, and keep up the great work in Ukraine. Keep fighting. I very much respect what you guys are both doing, getting the message out. It's awesome work, guys.
Likewise. Thank you. So we have, this has been Speak Freely Podcast, our near daily war journal. You can find out more at UkrainianFreedomNews.com. We also accept donations there to get essential supplies to soldiers and hospitals at the front line. UkrainianFreedomNews.com. This is Joe Lindsley in Lviv, Ukraine.
Yeah, and it was Zakhar Pikh as usual, and our Australian friend Drew Pavlou. Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you, Joe, and good luck.
Slava Ukraine.
Heroyam slava.
Heroyam slava. Heroyam slava.